Captain Sarah Chun adjusted her flight suit one last time before entering the briefing room. The morning sun cast long shadows across the airbase, and she could hear the distant roar of jets taking off for their dawn patrol. At 28, she had more flying hours than most pilots twice her age, but nobody in her new squadron knew that yet. The briefing room buzzed with conversation as pilots discussed the upcoming mission. Sarah took a seat in the back, observing her new teammates. She had been transferred to the 47th Fighter Squadron just 3 weeks ago, and most of the pilots still saw her as the quiet newcomer who rarely spoke up during meetings. "All right, listen up," called out Squadron Leader Marcus Rodriguez as he entered the room. A tall man with graying temples, Rodriguez commanded respect from everyone in the unit. Sarah had heard stories about his decorated career, including 3 combat tours and numerous commendations for bravery under fire. The mission briefing began with routine patrol information. The squadron would be conducting a training exercise over the desert mountains, practicing formation, flying, and tactical maneuvers. It seemed like another standard day of training, nothing that would test their real combat skills. Sarah noticed how the other pilots interacted with each other. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the squadron's self-appointed comedian, cracked jokes to lighten the mood. Captain Elena Vasquez, a veteran with 6 years of experience, reviewed her flight notes with military precision. First Lieutenant Tom Bradley, fresh out of flight school, looked nervous but eager to prove himself. None of them paid much attention to Sarah. She had grown accustomed to being overlooked. Throughout her career, people consistently underestimated her abilities. Her quiet demeanor and small stature often led others to assume she was inexperienced or incapable of handling high-pressure situations. What they didn't know was that Sarah had graduated top of her class from the Air Force Academy. She had completed advanced fighter training with honors and had logged over 2,000 flight hours in various aircraft. Most importantly, she had spent the last 4 years as part of a classified special operations unit, conducting missions that would never appear in any official records. The transfer to the 47th Squadron was supposed to be a step toward a normal military career. After years of dangerous covert operations, Sarah was ready for routine patrols and training exercises. She looked forward to flying without constantly watching for enemy missiles or navigating through hostile territory. As Rodriguez continued the briefing, Sarah's mind wandered to her previous squadron. Those pilots had known her capabilities and trusted her completely. She missed the camaraderie and mutual respect she had built with them over years of flying together. Starting over in a new unit meant proving herself all over again. "Chun," Rodriguez called out, snapping Sarah back to attention. "You'll be flying wing position with Morrison. Keep tight formation and follow his lead." Sarah nodded, though she noticed the slight condescension in Rodriguez's tone. Being assigned to wing position meant she was considered the least experienced pilot in the group. In her previous unit, she had often led complex missions and made split-second decisions that saved lives. Here, she was treated like a rookie who needed supervision. After the briefing, the pilots headed to the flight line to prepare their aircraft. Sarah walked alongside Morrison, who seemed friendly enough despite his obvious assumption that he was the more skilled pilot. "Don't worry about today," Morrison said with a patronizing smile. "These training exercises can be overwhelming for newer pilots, but you'll get the hang of it. Just stay close and do what I do." Sarah simply nodded and smiled politely. She had learned long ago that arguing about her experience only made people more skeptical. Her flying would speak for itself when the time came. The F-16 Fighting Falcons sat ready on the tarmac, their sleek forms gleaming in the morning sunlight. Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, checking every system and control surface. Her ground crew watched with mild interest, not yet familiar with her thorough approach to aircraft preparation. As she climbed in her cockpit, Sarah felt the familiar comfort of being surrounded by switches, displays, and controls. This was where she belonged, where her true abilities could shine. The aircraft responded to her touch like an extension of her own body, every system functioning exactly as she expected. The squadron taxied out in formation, with Rodriguez leading the group. Sarah maintained perfect position behind Morrison, demonstrating the precise flying skills that had made her legendary in her previous unit. But to the other pilots, she was simply following orders and staying in formation like any competent but unremarkable pilot. They climbed to 20,000 feet and began their training maneuvers over the desert. The landscape below stretched endlessly, a mixture of brown hills and scattered vegetation. Sarah had flown over similar terrain many times before, though usually under very different circumstances. The first exercise involved basic formation changes, with pilots switching positions while maintaining safe distances. Sarah executed each maneuver flawlessly, but her precision was attributed to caution rather than skill. Morrison occasionally offered encouragement over the radio, clearly believing he was mentoring a nervous newcomer. As the training continued, Sarah found herself growing restless. These simple exercises felt elementary after years of complex combat missions. She longed to show her true capabilities, to demonstrate the advanced techniques she had mastered through countless hours of dangerous flying. During a brief break in the exercises, the pilots engaged in casual conversation over the radio. Morrison shared stories about his college football days, while Vasquez discussed her plans for an upcoming vacation. Sarah listened quietly, contributing only when directly asked a question. "How about you, Chun?" Morrison asked. "Any interesting stories from your previous assignment?" Sarah paused before answering. Most of her previous missions were classified, and the few she could discuss would probably sound unbelievable to pilots who had only flown training missions. "Nothing too exciting," she replied. "Just routine patrol duties." The other pilots accepted this answer without question. They had no reason to suspect that the quiet woman flying behind Morrison had participated in some of the most dangerous missions in recent military history. As the morning progressed, the training exercises became slightly more complex. The squadron practiced intercepting imaginary enemy aircraft, using radar to track targets and coordinate their responses. Sarah followed Morrison's lead while privately noting several tactical errors in their approach. She wanted to suggest improvements, but held back. Speaking up would only draw unwanted attention and might be seen as presumptuous coming from the newest member of the squadron. Better to remain quiet and avoid creating any interpersonal conflicts. The other pilots continued to treat her with polite indifference. They weren't hostile or unfriendly, but they clearly didn't see her as an equal. Sarah had experienced this treatment before and knew that earning their respect would take time and the right opportunity. What none of them realized was that opportunity was approaching faster than anyone expected. Intelligence reports had missed crucial information about enemy activity in the region. While the 47th Squadron conducted their routine training exercises, hostile forces were positioning themselves for an attack that would test every pilot's skills and reveal the true capabilities of their newest member. Sarah continued flying in formation, maintaining perfect position and following Morrison's lead. She checked her instruments regularly and monitored radio communications, staying alert despite the routine nature of the mission. Old habits from her covert operations days kept her constantly aware of potential threats. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the desert air began to create thermal turbulence that made formation flying more challenging. Sarah adjusted her controls smoothly, compensating for the rough air without breaking formation. Her flying remained precise and professional, though unremarkable to the other pilots. As they completed another exercise and prepared for the next phase of training, none of the pilots suspected that their quiet afternoon was about to become a life-or-death struggle. Sarah's true test was approaching, and with it, the chance to finally show her squadron mates what she was really capable of. The radio crackled with routine communication between the pilots and ground control. Everything seemed normal as they continued their training mission, unaware that enemy forces were already moving into position for an attack that would change everything. The first indication something was wrong came from Rodriguez's radar warning receiver. A sharp, urgent tone filled his cockpit as unknown aircraft appeared on his screen, approaching fast from the northeast. His voice immediately became tense and professional over the radio. Break formation. Multiple bogies approaching from 270 degrees. Unknown intent. All aircraft maintain combat spread and prepare for defensive maneuvers. Sarah's training from her classified missions kicked in immediately. While the other pilots scrambled to interpret their radar displays and coordinate their response, she was already analyzing the tactical situation. The approaching aircraft were flying in a formation that suggested hostile intent, and their speed indicated they were military fighters. Morrison's voice crackled over the radio, confusion evident despite his attempts to sound confident. "I'm not seeing anything on my scope yet. Are we sure these aren't friendlies on a training mission?" Sarah could see the contacts clearly on her own radar. 6 aircraft approaching in attack formation, flying at an altitude and speed that eliminated any possibility they were conducting routine operations. Her experience in covert missions had taught her to recognize threat patterns that less experienced pilots might miss. "Negative," Rodriguez replied firmly. "These aircraft are not on any scheduled training flights. All pilots switch to tactical frequency and prepare for possible engagement." The squadron changed radio frequencies and spread out into a defensive formation. Sarah maintained her position behind Morrison while privately noting that their current formation was poorly suited for the developing threat. The approaching aircraft had positioned themselves to exploit the exact weaknesses she could see in her squadron's defensive posture. Vasquez's voice came over the radio with professional calm. "I have visual contact with the lead aircraft. They're not displaying any friendly identification markers, and they're not responding to standard communication attempts." Sarah looked toward the coordinates Vasquez had called out and immediately spotted the incoming formation. Her sharp eyes, trained through years of dangerous missions, picked out details that the other pilots missed. The aircraft were painted in desert camouflage and carried external weapons pods that clearly identified them as hostile fighters. Bradley's voice revealed his nervousness. "What's the plan here? Do we engage or try to avoid contact?" Rodriguez was clearly struggling with the tactical situation. His experience was primarily in training exercises and peacetime patrols. He had never faced a real combat scenario with unknown hostile aircraft. Maintain formation and await further orders from command. Sarah knew that waiting for orders from ground control would be a fatal mistake. The approaching aircraft were already maneuvering into attack positions, and any delay would give them a significant advantage. Her training screamed at her to take immediate defensive action, but she was not in command of the mission. "Command, this is Falcon Leader," Rodriguez called to ground control. "We have 6 unknown aircraft approaching our position with apparent hostile intent. Request immediate guidance on rules of engagement." The response from ground control was delayed and confused. The personnel monitoring the training exercise had not expected any real threats and were unprepared for a genuine combat situation. "Falcon Leader, we're checking with higher command. Maintain current position and continue monitoring the situation." Sarah watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The hostile aircraft were now less than 30 miles away and closing fast. Their formation had spread out into a classic attack pattern that would allow them to engage the squadron from multiple directions simultaneously. Morrison seemed to sense the danger, but lacked the experience to respond effectively. "These guys are getting pretty close. Should we start defensive maneuvers?" Before Rodriguez could respond, Sarah's radar warning receiver exploded with alarms. Multiple enemy aircraft had locked onto the squadron with their targeting radars, indicating they were preparing to launch missiles. The time for waiting and requesting orders had passed. "Missile launch," Vasquez shouted over the radio. "I have multiple missile launches from the lead group." Sarah's combat instincts took over completely. Without waiting for orders, she broke hard left and dove toward the deck, executing a defensive maneuver that her classified training had burned into muscle memory. The other pilots, caught off guard by the sudden missile threat, responded with less precision and coordination. All aircraft take evasive action. Rodriguez finally commanded, but his order came too late to prevent the chaos that followed. Morrison attempted to follow standard defensive procedures, but lacked the real-world experience to execute them under the stress of actual combat. His aircraft turned slowly and predictably, exactly the kind of movement that made him an easy target for the incoming missiles. Sarah watched Morrison's aircraft with growing concern. The young pilot was flying directly into the engagement envelope of one of the pursuing missiles, and his evasive maneuvers were insufficient to break the weapon's lock. She faced a critical decision that would reveal her true capabilities to the entire squadron. She could maintain her cover and continue flying as if she were an inexperienced pilot, allowing Morrison to face the missile threat alone. Or she could use her advanced combat training to intervene, saving his life, but exposing the fact that she possessed skills far beyond what anyone expected. The missile was now less than 10 seconds from impact with Morrison's aircraft. His panicked voice filled the radio as he struggled to break the lock. "I can't shake this thing. The missile is still tracking me." Sarah made her decision in an instant. She pulled her aircraft into a violent climbing turn that brought her directly between Morrison and the incoming missile. The maneuver required precise timing and exceptional flying skills, the kind of techniques that were only taught to elite pilots in classified programs. "Morrison, brake right now," she commanded with an authority that surprised everyone on the radio frequency. Her aircraft intercepted the missile's flight path and deployed chaff and flares in a complex pattern designed to confuse the weapon's guidance system. The missile, suddenly presented with multiple false targets, lost its lock on Morrison's aircraft and flew harmlessly past both fighters. But Sarah's intervention had exposed her position to the hostile aircraft, and she now found herself the primary target of their attack. Two enemy fighters immediately changed course to engage her directly, recognizing that she represented the greatest threat to their mission. Rodriguez's voice revealed his confusion about what had just happened. "Chun, how did you know to execute that maneuver? That's not standard defensive procedure." Sarah had no time to explain as the enemy fighters closed in on her position. She rolled inverted and pulled into a steep dive, using the aircraft's speed and her own advanced training to avoid the next wave of incoming missiles. Her flying was now unmistakably that of an expert combat pilot. Morrison's grateful but bewildered voice crackled over the radio. "Thanks for the save, Chun, but how did you learn to fly like that?" The other pilots were beginning to realize that their quiet, unassuming squadron mate possessed skills that far exceeded anything they had imagined. Sarah's precise defensive maneuvers and tactical awareness were clearly the result of extensive combat training and experience. Vasquez, despite being engaged in her own defensive battle, managed to observe Sarah's flying with professional appreciation. "Chun, your defensive flying is unlike anything I've seen in training. Where did you learn those techniques?" Sarah was too busy staying alive to provide detailed explanations. The two enemy fighters pursuing her were skilled and determined, forcing her to use every advanced technique she had learned during her classified missions. She rolled, climbed, and dove through a series of complex maneuvers that kept the hostile aircraft from achieving a successful missile lock. Bradley's voice revealed his awe at Sarah's flying abilities. "I've never seen anyone fly like that outside of demonstration teams. Chun, you're flying like an ace pilot." The enemy aircraft were now fully committed to their attack, with multiple fighters engaging different members of the squadron. What had started as a routine training mission had become a desperate aerial battle for survival. Sarah found herself in the position she had always avoided in her new assignment, forced to demonstrate the very skills she had hoped to keep hidden. As she executed another impossible evasive maneuver to avoid a missile, Sarah realized there was no longer any point in concealing her abilities. Her squadron mates were in mortal danger, and only her advanced training could keep them alive. The time had come to show them exactly what kind of pilot had been flying quietly in their formation. Rodriguez's voice carried a new tone of respect and urgency. Chun, I don't know what your background is, but right now you're flying better than anyone else in this squadron. Can you help coordinate our defense? Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. Roger that, squadron leader. All aircraft follow my lead and execute maneuvers exactly as I call them. We're going to turn this ambush around. The quiet, unassuming pilot they had all underestimated was about to take command of the most dangerous aerial engagement any of them had ever experienced. Sarah's transformation from quiet squadron member to tactical commander was immediate and decisive. Her voice over the radio carried an authority that made every pilot instantly recognize they were listening to someone with extensive combat experience. Morrison, execute a climbing left spiral and release chaff on my mark. Vasquez, brake right and climb at Angels 20. Bradley, maintain current heading but descend to Angels 15. Rodriguez, you're with me for a high-speed attack run on the lead enemy formation. The precision and confidence of her tactical directions stunned the other pilots. These were not the tentative suggestions of an inexperienced aviator, but the firm commands of someone who had clearly led complex aerial engagements before. Morrison immediately responded to Sarah's instructions, executing the climbing spiral with newfound confidence. Roger, Chun, climbing left and standing by for chaff release. As the squadron began following Sarah's directions, their defensive posture transformed from chaotic and reactive to coordinated and purposeful. The enemy fighters, who had been systematically picking apart their formation, suddenly found themselves facing a unified and tactically sound response. Sarah's own flying during this phase was nothing short of extraordinary. She engaged two enemy fighters simultaneously, using advanced combat maneuvers that demonstrated years of elite training. Her aircraft danced through the sky with a precision that left the other pilots speechless. Chaff now, Morrison, Sarah commanded as an enemy missile approached his position. The countermeasures deployed exactly when needed, causing the missile to lose its target and explode harmlessly in empty air. Vasquez, now positioned at higher altitude as Sarah had directed, found herself with a perfect attack angle on one of the enemy fighters. I have a clear shot on the trailing bandit. Requesting permission to engage. Take the shot, Sarah replied, while simultaneously executing a barrel roll that brought her behind another enemy aircraft. Bradley, there's a fighter at your 4 o'clock. Brake left immediately and climb. Bradley's maneuver perfectly timed with Sarah's prediction, causing the enemy pilot to overshoot and present his aircraft as a target for Rodriguez, who had been waiting for exactly that opportunity. Fox 2, Rodriguez called out as he launched a missile at the exposed enemy fighter. The weapon tracked perfectly and destroyed the hostile aircraft in a spectacular explosion that lit up the desert sky. Sarah's tactical awareness seemed to encompass the entire aerial battlefield. She anticipated enemy movements before they happened and positioned her squadron mates to exploit every tactical advantage. Her commands came in rapid succession, each one precisely timed to maximize their defensive effectiveness. Morrison, there are 2 bandits approaching from your 6. Execute a split S maneuver and dive toward the deck. Vasquez, cover his descent and engage the trailing aircraft. Bradley, climb to support position and watch for additional threats from the east. The enemy formation, which had initially held every advantage, was now being systematically dismantled by Sarah's tactical brilliance. The hostile pilots found themselves constantly reacting to her maneuvers instead of executing their own attack plan. Rodriguez, flying wing position with Sarah, watched in amazement as she engaged multiple enemy aircraft while simultaneously coordinating the entire squadron's defensive actions. Chun, your flying is incredible. Where did you learn combat tactics like this? Sarah's response was brief and focused, her attention entirely devoted to the ongoing battle. I'll explain later, sir. Right now, we need to finish this fight. She rolled inverted and dove toward an enemy fighter that was pursuing Bradley. Her attack run was perfectly executed, forcing the hostile pilot to break off his pursuit and attempt defensive maneuvers. But Sarah anticipated his response and adjusted her attack angle to maintain pressure. Bradley, the bandit on your tail, is breaking left. Continue your climb and prepare to reverse course on my mark. The coordination between Sarah and Bradley was flawless, despite the fact that they had never flown together in combat before. Her tactical directions were so clear and precise that even the inexperienced pilot could execute complex maneuvers with confidence. Morrison, now free from immediate threats thanks to Sarah's defensive coordination, found himself in an ideal position to support the overall engagement. Chen, I have a clear line of sight on the enemy leader. Should I engage? Negative, Morrison. Maintain your position and watch for reinforcements. That leader is mine. Sarah's pursuit of the enemy formation leader demonstrated flying skills that bordered on the incredible. She matched the hostile pilot maneuver for maneuver, gradually gaining position despite his desperate attempts to escape or reverse the engagement. The enemy leader was clearly an experienced combat pilot, but even his advanced skills were no match for Sarah's superior training and tactical awareness. She steadily closed the distance while avoiding his defensive missile launches and cannon fire. Vasquez, having successfully engaged her assigned target, watched Sarah's pursuit with professional admiration. I've never seen flying like this outside of classified demonstration videos. Chun is operating at a completely different level than the rest of us. The aerial battle had turned decisively in favor of the 47th Squadron, but Sarah remained focused on eliminating the remaining threats. Her tactical commands continued to position each pilot for maximum effectiveness, while she personally engaged the most dangerous enemy aircraft. Rodriguez, break high and right. There's a bandit attempting to flank our formation from the north. Vasquez, move to support Bradley's position. Morrison, maintain overwatch and call out any additional contacts. Her situational awareness was complete and accurate, allowing her to track multiple aircraft while engaging in high-speed combat maneuvers. The other pilots began to understand they were witnessing a level of flying skill that few aviators ever achieved. Sarah finally achieved a firing solution on the enemy leader and launched a missile that tracked perfectly to its target. The hostile aircraft exploded in a fireball that marked the end of organized enemy resistance. Splash 1 bandit leader, Sarah reported with professional calm. All aircraft, check in and report status. One by one, the squadron members reported their condition and remaining fuel status. Despite the intensity of the combat, Sarah's tactical leadership had brought them through the engagement with minimal damage and no casualties. Rodriguez's voice carried a new tone of deep respect as he addressed Sarah over the radio. Outstanding work, Chun. Your tactical command saved this entire squadron. I don't know what your background is, but you just demonstrated the finest combat flying I've ever witnessed. As the squadron reformed and headed back to base, the other pilots continued expressing their amazement at Sarah's performance. Morrison, whose life she had saved early in the engagement, was particularly effusive in his gratitude and praise. Chun, you flew like someone with years of combat experience. That wasn't beginner's luck or natural talent. You've clearly done this before, and at a very high level. Sarah's response was characteristically modest, despite her extraordinary performance. I've had some specialized training that prepared me for situations like this. I'm just glad everyone made it home safely. But the other pilots were not satisfied with such a brief explanation. They had witnessed flying and tactical leadership that clearly indicated extensive combat experience and advanced training far beyond standard pilot programs. Vasquez voiced what everyone was thinking. Chun, that kind of flying doesn't come from some specialized training. You flew like a test pilot or someone from an elite combat unit. Your tactical awareness and combat skills are at an extraordinary level. As they approached their home airbase, Sarah knew her days of anonymity in the squadron were over. Her performance during the ambush had revealed capabilities that could not be explained away or hidden. The quiet, unassuming pilot who had flown in the background for 3 weeks was about to become the most respected and admired member of the 47th Squadron. Rodriguez's final radio transmission before landing carried a promise that Sarah knew would fundamentally change her relationship with her squadron mates. Chin, when we debrief this mission, I want a complete explanation of your background and training. Flying like that doesn't happen by accident. The landing pattern felt different as Sarah approached the runway. Her aircraft touched down with the same precision she had always demonstrated, but now that precision was recognized for what it truly was, the mark of an elite pilot whose skills had just saved 6 lives and turned a certain disaster into a decisive victory. Ground crews and base personnel gathered as the squadron taxied back to the flight line. Word of the aerial engagement had already reached the base, and everyone wanted to see the pilots who had successfully defeated a surprise attack by hostile aircraft. As Sarah shut down her aircraft and climbed out of the cockpit, she was greeted by her squadron mates with expressions of respect, gratitude, and intense curiosity. The quiet pilot they had barely noticed for 3 weeks had revealed herself to be one of the most skilled combat aviators any of them had ever encountered. Morrison was the first to approach as she removed her helmet. "Sarah, I owe you my life. That defensive maneuver you executed to save me from that missile. I've never seen anything like it. You're not just a good pilot, you're an exceptional one." The transformation in how her squadron viewed her was complete and immediate. The woman they had politely ignored and casually underestimated had proven herself to be their superior in every aspect of combat flying. Her quiet demeanor had hidden skills that would make her a legend among aviators who heard the story of this engagement. As they walked toward the debriefing room, Sarah knew that her attempt to blend in and fly under the radar had ended permanently. Her true capabilities were now known, and with that knowledge came new responsibilities and expectations that would define the rest of her career with the 47th Squadron. The ambush that was meant to destroy them had instead forged a new understanding of what their quiet squadron mate could accomplish when the situation demanded her very best flying.